crowd. I got great news. I got great news for you guys this morning. It's July 24th, 2018, and Hillary Rodham Clinton is not President of the United States of America. I'm humbled to be here today. I'm humbled to be here today. And I want to thank Kyle for that gracious introduction, and I want to thank Charlie Kirk. You know, last year in this meeting, there were about 150 people attending this conference, 3 days. This year, over 800 people are here. Give yourselves a round of applause for getting up here. You know, I'm honored to be in the United States Senate. 100 people, supposedly the greatest deliberative body in the history of mankind. And I got there, you know, in the first meeting, you're sitting around and you look at all these icons and you think, my goodness, how did I get here? I'm an outsider, I never ran for anything in my life. And I knew the country was headed in the wrong direction, and I decided to try to do something about it. And so I ran for the Senate, and I caught the car. I got elected. And I'm sitting around, I'm looking at all these people, and, you know, there's Orrin Hatch and Mitch McConnell and Lamar Alexander, all these icons, and I'm thinking, my goodness, how in the world did I get here? And after I was up there for a month or so, I looked around them and said, how the hell did they get here? But I have to tell you, in the United States Senate, you meet all kinds of people. And I want to talk to you today about the crisis that we have before us, because there are things we can do about that. But you meet people in the United States Senate you never met before. I was traveling to China recently, leaving from Chicago, going to Beijing. And it was a new plane, the little double-decker. It's got 4 engines and all. And the guy sitting next to me was a Democrat. And so I thought, oh, this is going to be fun. And so we're sitting there talking. He says, look, I'm a nervous flyer. You'll have to forgive me. And so forth. So we get off, and sure enough, about an hour in the flight, we have a problem. I hear this bump. And the pilot comes on, he says, ladies and gentlemen, I know you're worried what that was, and we just lost our number 4 engine on the port side. I said, okay. And he said, don't worry. He said, this plane's is engineered to do this without any problem, so we're going to continue on. So we go on another couple of hours, and the same sound. And he says, ladies and gentlemen, this has never happened to me in 30 years of flying. He said, we lost our 2nd engine, but this plane, it's balanced, it's one on either side. We're going to continue on to Beijing. And this guy is a nervous flyer, and he's saying, oh my God, you know, what's going to happen here and all this. And he wouldn't even get into politics. It's a true story. And so we go on another, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours. It's a long flight. And the same thing happens again. The pilot comes on and he says, look, I know you're distressed about this, but let me tell you, we just lost our 3rd engine. But this plane, I assure you, is totally capable of flying on 4 engines, or on 1 engine. And we have a meeting now that's going to be right after we land. So we're going to be late for this meeting. And this guy has organized the meeting, and he's sitting there, oh, we're going to be late, we're going to be late. He says, you know, if we lose that 4th engine, we're going to be up here all day. Come on, guys, if we lose the 4th engine, we're going to be here all day. Seriously. I want to tell you, we are in a fight for our republic. A fight for our republic. We've had a 100-year slide towards socialism. It's been happening a day at a time, a minute at a time, and I've seen it happen. I'm an outsider for the last few decades. I've been in business, and I've seen it happen. We have had a drive towards socialism. We've had 3 political supermajorities, all Democratic, in the last 100 years. The first gave us the Great Society, the second, the New Deal, and the third, Dodd-Frank and Obamacare. Now, I'm just a business guy, but I'm here to tell you, you can put at the feet of those 3 supermajorities most of the responsibility of this financial catastrophe that I'm going to talk to you about in a few minutes. You can put at the feet of those 3 supermajorities. And the irony of all that, and the reason you're here, and the reason I ran for the Senate, is that they failed the very people they claim to champion, the working poor and the working middle class of America. The poverty rate today in the United States is exactly the same as it was in 1965 when the Great Society was signed on the desk that I get to use in Richard Russell's old office. It reminds me every day of how bigger government has failed. This experiment of the American politicians over the last 100 years has ultimately failed. But I also have great news today. In 2016, thanks to you, we elected, I believe, a man of destiny. I believe. Look, anybody in this town, nobody in this town saw this guy coming. Nobody saw me coming. This man ran because he told the truth about politicians, bureaucrats, and the media. And we elected him. And here's a man that doesn't fit the picture of what Washington sees as the leader in the White House, and yet his agenda is working. I can tell you right now that I was in the White House 2 weeks after he was inaugurated. It was a leadership meeting talking about what we were going to do in the first 2 years. And the president said, job one is to grow the economy. We need to work on regulations, energy, and taxes. And then we need to get after Dodd-Frank. And guess what? That's what we did. And we freed up $6 trillion into the economy. And that agenda works, guys. 3.5 million new jobs have been created under President Donald Trump. 870 regulations. And we passed a bill last year that allowed, now listen to this, we had to have an act of Congress, but we passed a bill to let the Veterans Administration head fire people for not doing their job. And since that time, they have fired 1,550 people from the Veterans Administration for not showing up to work and doing their job. This agenda works, guys. We nominated and confirmed Neil Gorsuch to the United States Supreme Court. Folks, we have the lowest unemployment for the African American community in the history of the United States of America. This agenda works. It's no secret. What we believe in works. You do not have to be embarrassed to be conservative. You don't. The intelligentsia of academia has failed. What they believe in has failed. I just got back from a trip to Greece. I can tell you, we don't want to go there. And yet, over 100 years, we now have a system where our government has bloated up to the point where since 2000, it grew from $2.4 trillion to $4.2 trillion last year, and it doesn't work. We've got to change that. President Trump is the president to do that. And I can tell you, I'm so delighted to be on this stage right after Jeff Sessions. Jeff and I were the two senators in the Republican caucus who supported Donald Trump for president of the United States last year. And I'm delighted to be up here and be able to tell you that. As good as these results are, consumer confidence at a 20-year high, CEO confidence at a 20-year high, illegal crossing of the southern border are down dramatically, and all we're doing is enforcing the law. How about that? But there's a lot more to do. This ship has been turned, but only just slightly. Only just slightly. I talked to the president yesterday, and I keep reminding him he's a man of destiny, and he has the opportunity to be the president in U.S. history that turns the slide away from socialism. But we've got to develop a trend, guys. It can't just be one president. It's got to be all of us. That's what I'm here to talk to you about today. We've got to fix this debt crisis. The number one crisis in the world today is United States debt, $21 trillion, and that's not the worst of it. Each one of you, when you graduate from college, you'll get a job, you'll form a household, some of you will get married eventually, and you'll form a household. And when you do, you'll get a credit card bill from the United States federal government for $1 million. That will be your responsibility for the intransigence of this town over the last 50 years in building up that debt. $130 trillion of unfunded liabilities over the next 30 years alone. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a serious crisis. But the solutions are there. This president is doing that. Number one was growing the economy. Number two is fixing this budget process. So we now have a select committee in the Senate and the House directed to come up with a new way to fund the government. You realize we've only funded the federal government 4 times on time since 1974 when that Budget Act was put into place. Actually, Congress has closed the government down 20 times since 1974. This slide towards socialism has shown up in so many ways, in the dysfunction of the Senate, in the intransigence of our financial spending, and the way we treat the social order in America today. I'm here to tell you that this president has called us to support ICE, and I'm proud to have put a bill in last week to stand with our men in uniform protecting our borders. And lastly, as the outsider in the United States Senate, I'm proud to tell you today, the very first thing I did on the very first day after I was sworn in to this office is I put a term limit bill, and I'm going to keep fighting until we get term limits in the United States Senate and the United States Congress. The battle in your lifetime is very clear. I lived in Asia, I've lived in Europe, I've worked pretty much on every continent except Antarctica, and I have no interest in going there. But I will tell you, the world is changing dramatically. I believe the world is more dangerous right now than any time in my lifetime. And look, I grew up in the Cold War. I know what that's like. But 8 years under Barack Obama, backing up from our responsibility with the world, created a power vacuum that we're dealing with today. President Trump was dealing with a nuclear capability in North Korea. Can you believe that? He has to face up now to the JCPOA, and I'm proud to tell you this president had the backbone to stand up and withdraw from the JCPOA. And another indication of why he's not afraid of the politicians in Washington, after this has been law for over 20 years, this president stood up and moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and I'm proud to tell you he got that done. Listen to me, this is serious. The battle in your lifetime is going to be between countries who believe in self-determination. That's us, self-determination, and state control. Right now, Russia and China are the leaders of that ethos over here. And I would argue that they've proven that it really fails. Over here, the rest of the world believes in individual sanctity, individual liberty. They do it in different ways. We're the leader of that group. We didn't ask for that. It's our destiny. And the minute you try to walk away from that responsibility, you see what happens, like we saw in the last 8 years, where we create power vacuums around the world. This president's committed to fix that. This president got us to commit to $160 billion to rebuild our military and to protect the men and women in uniform around the world who are working every day to provide freedom for you and me. Our problem is that our colleges, and to some degree high schools, but mostly colleges, have created this aura where if you're a conservative, you must be a lower IQ person. Because if you have an IQ, you see that this enlightened world, the progressive world, watch how they use words, guys, the progressivism of the last 100 years. See how that's benefited us? It gave us $21 trillion of debt and all these failed programs up here. Look, in 1976, or 75, before Jimmy Carter created the Department of Education, our 14-year-olds were #1 in the world in math and science. Today, after spending tens of trillions of dollars on public education, our 14-year-olds are 25 and 26 in math and science in the world. Now, that's unacceptable. But it just shows you that big government programs that start and end in Washington do not solve the problems back home. I'm here to tell you, there's a better way. Ronald Reagan once said, this is how serious it is. Ronald Reagan once said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It has to be fought for, protected, and passed on so they can do the same. Or one day, in our sunset years, we'll be sitting around talking to our children and our children's children about what it was like in America when women and men were free. Not on my watch and not on your watch. America has always risen to the crisis of the day. I believe in our founding principles. Go back and look. You know, we're talking about the rules that caused dysfunction in the Senate. I went back and looked at the original rules of the Senate. There were 6 pages of rules, 19 rules. Today we have 6 inches of rules and precedents and everything else, and we have total dysfunction up here. The solutions are there. We just can't get through the process to implement the solutions. And that's going to change because the crisis is at hand. Social Security Trust Fund goes to 0 in 12 years. Medicare Trust Fund goes to 0 in 8 years. The crisis is at hand, and Ronald Reagan was right. The battle is right now. Do not go to college being embarrassed about being conservative. Tell your friends why this works. But here's what we believe. And the founders had it right. We believe in economic opportunity for everybody. We believe in fiscal responsibility. We believe in limited government. And we believe most of all in individual liberty. It's worth fighting for, it's worth dying for, and men and women ever since the founding of this country have done just that. It's our responsibility to not let that be in vain. This country is bigger than you. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than Donald Trump. This country is a country of destiny. It always has been, and it always will be. But it needs people like you who are leaders and willing to stand up for what's right and remind people of what works and what doesn't work. We have that right now. Fear not the challenges of today, but embrace the possibilities of tomorrow. Your future is brighter than my future was, if you can believe that. Yes, the world's very dangerous, but the potential of this world. Imagine, in my lifetime, we went from slide rules to cell phones. I have access, you have access to the world's aggregate accumulation of human knowledge right at your fingertip in that mobile device. Imagine if you can extrapolate 20 years, 30 years in the future, what might be possible. Some of you will be leading that. Many of you will. I pray you will. Be strong, be forceful, and be optimistic, because the world will be a better place because of you being here today. I can tell you right now, Charlie Kirk is on to something. You can see the fire here, and I'm telling you, this will continue. My last thing for you right now is this. America is the greatest country in the history of the world. You and I have been blessed in a way that I cannot describe to you. The last 70 years has produced a standard of living the world has never seen. It's our responsibility not to squander that, to use it appropriately. We've got to deal with a debt crisis in your lifetime, and we will, and the world will be a better place. God bless you for being here. God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.